Well, I remember when we used to play soccer, nobody liked to choose the teams. Everybody wanted to play, but nobody wanted to start. Like, would you like to choose the team? No, not me. How about you? No, nobody. And then, you need two persons to do this, right? Because you have two teams. The way we do this is like two persons are willing to take this task, and they will choose people in their team. But as usually, maybe you know this, when you start choosing, you choose the best people first, the most talented first, and then at the end, you take whatever is left. Left. You're like, okay, I take you. Come here. And sometimes these the least ones. They are the best ones because sometimes they're like, no, I don't know how to play, so they play defense. So they, the one who takes this responsibility to choose the teams, his own team, is when you do this, you know that you are called for a higher purpose because you will be the captain of the team. So nobody wants that. You want to play and have fun, but nobody wants this responsibility. That the way you choose the team will set you to win the game or to lose the game. So toward, victory or disgrace. So I think in the same way, Jesus chose his team, and the first one was Peter. And maybe you think, Peter was the best. Well, we'll see. Peter was Jesus' best player, not because what he was capable of, but what he will be capable to do in the future. So Simon Peter was called for a higher purpose, and I believe each one of us here, we are like Peter. We are called for a higher purpose. So let's talk a little bit about Simon Peter, how to be called for a higher purpose. Let's start with John chapter 1, verses 41 and 42, where we read about Simon Peter's call. John 1:41. Let's start with 40. One of the two who heard John speak and followed Jesus was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. And pay attention, this is so strange. This is the first time when Jesus sees Simon, face to face. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, the son of John. You shall be called Cephas," which means Peter. That means rock, the rock. Simon Peter wasn't the first disciple called. He was the first disciple chosen, selected by Jesus. But he was not the first one called. John, James, and Andrew were the first men actually called to follow Jesus Christ. They followed because they wanted, and then Jesus called them. And Andrew brought his brother Simon almost in the same day, probably evening or something. Jesus lived in Capernaum, and he was probably renting a house or something. So Andrew went to his brother, brought him, and said, "Hey, we found the Messiah." Jesus looked at him, at Simon, and for the first time talking to him, he gave him a nickname. By the way, his name is not Peter. Everybody knows him today by his nickname, the Rock. But this is not his name, His name is Simon. If you wonder what Simon means, a literal Greek translation of Simon means flat nose. So how about you have a baby and you name that baby flat nose? That's bad, Maybe it was something resembled to him, I don't know, but this is how his parents call him, hey flat nose, come here. Hey flat nose, do this or do that. In the gospel, whenever his name Simon is used, it's always used with his house, when like Simon's house, or Simon's mother-in-law, or Simon's fishing business. Nothing about his spiritual life, but about his common life. Sometimes Simon is used to display his unregenerate characteristics. Jesus gave him the nickname Peter, or the Rock, to set a new course in his life. This was his potential of a rock. Right now, he was just a flat nose. But Jesus said, you are this. How about when you met for the first time a person, he looked into your eyes and he will say, you are the wall. Nobody gets through you. I'm like, oh, you don't know me. Everybody gets through me. I mean, I'm nobody. And after a while, you think, oh, who am I? Or you play soccer and you are so bad of it, you don't know how to play it and you suck. And somebody comes to you and says, you are the bulldog. You can do everything. They will be scared when you charge. Well, after a while, you will think, man, I'm the bulldog. So in this way, the same way, Jesus looked in his eyes and he said, you are the rock. He said his potential, not his actuality, but the potential of him. By using his name, Jesus wanted to challenge Simon Peter and to leave behind his tendency to be unreliable and shifty. He was shifting, and you couldn't, make decisions when you have Peter with you, Simon Peter. Simon Peter was that kind of a man that promises a lot of things, but by the end of what he promised, he would disappear. You cannot, he's not reliable, okay? He cannot fulfill his promises. He is that kind of a person that he's involved 100% in the beginning, and then he would just disappear. Simon was not reliable. He was the first one in action, but also the first one leaving the action. So imagine, you cannot rely on him. The nickname was the opposite, was to remind him that he is the man he should be, like the rock, stable, dependable, strong. There is an interesting fact throughout the Gospels. When he was being rebuked, he was called Simon. When he was instructed or praised, he was called Simon Peter. But whenever he got it right, showed leadership, or he had like faith, he was called always Peter. So I found this very interesting. He was Simon when he was losing it. He was Simon Peter when he was learning something, but then Peter when he got it. And Jesus was consistent throughout the whole gospel. You will see this. He will name him, he will call him in this way. All of this part of his he was part of a training for, we say 3.5 years, but actually the training was just for 1.5 years. The other year and a half was just, that dance. They came, he saw Jesus, and he went back to his business. Jesus saw him afterwards, and he said, come after me, and I will make you a fisherman. And they came, and then they went back home. But from the moment when they were and he was his disciple and his apostle, it is just 1.5 years. So it's just half of the period. So imagine, Jesus' ministry was for 3.5 years, and he trained day by day his disciples and his apostles just for 1.5 years. It's like too short, I think, but Jesus can do it. Even though he was not the first to be called, it was Simon who would be the first of the 12 that in Matthew chapter 10 verse 2 says, now the names of the 12 apostles are these. First, Simon. Now, when it says first, it's not just first called, but also first among them. Jesus gave him this position of a spokesman or a leader of the 12. And maybe we wonder why. He was like a steam engine, like a locomotive. How do you say locomotive? Yeah, the engine of a train. And he was carrying everybody else after him. Jesus intended to connect the whole train of Christianity, and he would start the whole thing. That's why Peter was very important for Jesus. And he spent more time with Peter, Jesus spent more time with Peter and James and John than with everybody else. Why? Because they would be very important for Christianity, and Peter especially. He was called to lead the very beginnings of Christianity. Well, Simon Peter, we know that Simon Peter was a fisherman, and I don't know if you know, but there are like 3 types of fish in the Sea of Galilee. But Simon Peter and Andrew, his brother, they were specialized in catching tilapia. Well, they called it another way, or musht, something like that. A type of fish that is caught just during night by nets, because they live in a school of fish. So Peter's mentality was to catch many fish, not just one. He was not staying by the pier and says, "Oh, I have another one." Well, so his mentality was, I think, Jesus looked at his mentality and said, "I can use this for Christianity." But somewhere along the road, we kind of lost the mentality, because we think more like a fishing rod style of fishing. But Jesus said, "No, you'll be catchers of men, with the nets full of men." So Simon Peter's mentality was not to catch one or a bucket of fish, but many, like the whole boat full of fish. This is what he was looking for. Simon was from Bethsaida, a small village in the north part of the Sea of Galilee, and they moved to Capernaum, a bigger village. So they were part of a smaller village, but they moved because probably their mentality was next level. Like, we have more opportunities and our business grew. They moved their business from a small village to a bigger one, and there they met Jesus. If I can say, their business led to Jesus, because in this way Jesus met them by the Sea of Galilee. Besides the fisherman mentality and looking for new opportunities, Simon Peter was interested in the Messiah. How do we know? Because when Andrew was more interested in Messiah than him in the spiritual things, because he was a disciple of John the Baptist. But interesting, when Andrew came to him and said, "Hey, we found the Messiah," he thought, "Oh, that's great." In that time, not many people were expecting the Messiah to come. Well, actually, this was the reason John the Baptist was sent by God, to awaken them. But they were already awakened. And when he heard that, he said, "Yeah, I want to see the Messiah." So he was into the spiritual things. He was expecting the Messiah to come. He was interested. His mentality, and you can see all these things coming together at Pentecost. It was Simon Peter who stood up and took the lead, and he said, "Hey, God made Jesus both," interesting, listen what he said, "both Lord and Messiah and Christ, and you killed him." He was pretty bold, and said, and they thought, oh, what should we do? And said, you should be baptized. And interesting, he caught many fish in that day. Same mentality, but he was totally transformed by the Holy Spirit. The one who was speaking when nobody dared to speak was Simon Peter. And this is why he is the preacher of the new covenant during Pentecost. Because it was normal for him. He was trained. Everything was he. Nobody had the guts to rebuke Jesus in Matthew 16:22, but Simon Peter did it. At the Pentecost, he stood in front of the multitude and he said, you killed him, you crucified the Messiah. So you see how God used everything who he was, and he called him, and he was the first one, number one, for a reason. Question. Why do you think Jesus called you to be his disciple? Because you're a nobody? No, you're a commoner, but not a nobody. You have something that Jesus may use. Please, until the next small group, think about, make a list of your background. Where are you from? Your history, your conversion, your education, your experience. And try to figure out why God called you to be his disciple. What is the purpose? For Simon Peter was to catch people. Not one, not two, but hundreds. And he, in 3,000, was pierced in their hearts at the Pentecost. And the church, so the church in Jerusalem was, do you know how big was the church in Jerusalem before the Pentecost? A wild guess. Come on. 120. Yes. But then, after that day, the membership of the church, of the local church, grew to 3,120. This is like, they were not prepared for this. But one sermon, and God used that sermon, and that person who was totally transformed, Simon Peter. Did you wonder why Jesus called you to be his disciple? Maybe because you are in a context where you have maybe 30 or maybe less unregenerate, lost people to be caught in the net for God's kingdom. How about this? God called you to be in that class, to be at that job, to be wherever you are, just to do what Peter did, to take your net and throw it. And God will help you. Remember, you are called for a greater purpose. Not just to do your job, but to do God's job. His kingdom, not your kingdom. I think this is one of the things that I've learned from Peter. Peter, number two, Peter was a true leader. Was not just called by Jesus in this way, but he was a true leader. Simon Peter was born to be leader. I know there are a lot of people saying that leaders are made. But by the way, how you make a leader if he's like zero, nothing? No, they have something. There are some natural gifts that if you polish, you could become a great leader. And by the way, he found the ultimate teacher. He found God's kingdom, and he became a great leader. Simon Peter was curious, and in his curiosity led him to Jesus. He was curious. Oh, you found the Messiah. I want to see that Messiah. He was curious. When Jesus saw him for the first time, he changed Peter's destiny. And I think curiosity is very important for leadership. If one is satisfied with the level of knowledge and is indifferent to things that he cannot understand or he doesn't know, then you are not prepared to be a leader. But to be a leader means to be curious, you want to know more. Why is this important? if you have the answers, so you ask questions, then you have the answers. When you have the answers, you have knowledge. And we know that if one has knowledge, has also power in leadership. And in the Gospel, Simon Peter asked a lot of questions. Do you remember any of his questions? Right off the bat, like this. Do you remember one of his questions? In one instance, he asked Jesus to explain his parables. He asked how many times to forgive his neighbor. Remember this one? He was interested. He didn't get it. I said, okay, be more specific, Lord. How many? He asked about the reward for leaving everything behind for following Jesus. He was the one asking. He said, well, we left everything. Now, what is our reward? He asked about Jesus, the resurrected one. In John, he asked, I want to know more about it. And he was the one taking initiative, remember? Running. There were two disciples running in that morning. Do you remember? It was Peter and John. But John was not so old like Peter, and he was faster. But he stopped. But remember who was the one getting in the tomb? Peter. He really wanted to know. Why? Curiosity. I want to know. Simon Peter took initiative, as I said. He was a man of initiative, ambition, energy, action. Where when Jesus asked something, he was the one answering the question, not just asking a question, but he was answering the questions. Peter, there was times when Peter answered, and after he answered, he thought about what he answered. He was not thinking all the time, but his mouth, like big mouth, was always there, but his thinking not always there. So when all the apostles were afraid to say that Jesus was the Messiah, the Son of God, Simon Peter was like straight and clear. He said, yeah, well, obvious, you are the Messiah, you are the Son of God. But everybody else, he took initiative, okay? When remember in the Garden of Gethsemane, the soldiers were surrounding them, Peter took initiative and he defended Jesus. Now, remember, Simon Peter was not a soldier, okay? He was a fisherman. And he aimed probably for the head of the slave, but he missed it. I mean, not so much, but he cut his ear, right? But what was in his mind? I mean, you come there and you think, oh, I can hack everyone, like I can kill all. There were soldiers, trained soldiers, and maybe another platoon or something coming like in reinforcement, and he was the only one. He was not thinking, but he was taking initiative, right? I think I like it. Well, maybe he didn't cite the situation, he cited just the opportunity. He was not thinking much about it. What else? In this, Peter, I believe that Peter was kind of like a B1 member, or what we should be, ready for action and taking initiative. And I don't know if you are like Simon Peter, but I think you should be like him. We should be like him. To be ready to do it. I don't know. Are you ready to take action and take initiative? Or maybe you are bored and just passive. Today, Christianity needs more people like Simon Peter. And I hope we will produce this kind of a people like me, and like you. And you will say, like me, I want to be like this. Simon Peter was also involved and always in the middle of the action all the time. Simon Peter was not somewhere in the corner, relaxed and giving orders to others and say, hey, you do this. That's why I said, he was more like a B1 mentality. I will do it. He was in the middle of it. He was showing the way. He was the guide for the others. He was the beacon of light. He was always in the middle of the action. When Jesus told him, come, now you know what I'm referring to, right? It was storm. Jesus was walking on the water. And Jesus said, come. Well, Peter was already out of the boat, walking on the waters. When the other apostles, they were busy to save their lives by preventing them to get out of the boat, Peter was the only one jumping out of the boat because he thought, if Jesus is there, he is in the middle of the action, I will be in the middle of the action. I will be there. So he jumped and he walked, and you know the rest, right? After a while, well, he's doing things without thinking, but after a while he was starting thinking, I'm like, what I'm doing? I'm walking on the water. And then he asked for help. Lord, help me! So Jesus helped him. But he was right. When he saw the action, he said, I'll be there. If Jesus is there, there is another situation. If you remember, he did the same thing, but now he's kind of like negative. When Jesus was arrested, and John opened the door for Peter to be closer to Jesus, same thing. He didn't have like much thought of the fact that he could be caught. He was a public figure then, and he could be caught. But he was right there in the middle of the action. Why? Because Jesus was there in the middle of the action. All the other apostles, I said, no, thank you. But John said, I can introduce you. We know that John had connections with the high priest. So that's why Peter is right there. He could be arrested, but he was 100% in. 100% in. Remember, in the beginning, he was 100% in, and then he left. Now, he learned this lesson. 100% in, and I'm staying. This is one of the signs of a great leader. When everybody leaves and runs, that leader finds his way to be closer. Why should he miss the action? This is a true leadership mentality. When everybody runs back, he runs forward. He is 100% in. And this was Peter. 100% in. And I don't know, just think about this. Are you 100% in? Can you live your life, can you leave the others and jump out of the boat? Because the action is outside the boat, not inside the boat. Is not preserving your life, but giving your life. I don't know, are you or you are not 100% in? You can miss the action. Jesus is there. Where Jesus is, I am too. And by the way, you know why I'm asking you every Sunday if you've seen God at work in your life? Because there is the action. Where Jesus is, you have action. If you are curious, you take initiative and you are 100% in, people will follow you. Maybe not multitudes, but some will follow you, your example, and they will be like you. Be the one. I know you are not doing it, if you are doing it, maybe you'll be followed, maybe not, but at least for your satisfaction, you are there with Jesus. I think it's good. And I have another point here. I was thinking of the fact that he's an interesting apostle. Very interesting. Simon Peter was transformed. He learned to obey. As a leader, you like others to obey you, but you don't obey. But he learned to obey, and he learned to obey because of love. And this is kind of a mysterious maybe or weird, but remember Simon Peter's greater example of love was Jesus Christ. Simon Peter was the leader of the leaders group, and probably they started the discussion during the Passover meal, who will be the greatest after Jesus will die. And probably from here, from this group, the talk and the arguments, they caught them all. Jesus, they were so interested in this topic, they didn't see Jesus going in that direction to take the basin and the towel, and he started to wash their feet. When it was Peter's turn, he was against it. John 13, 8-9. Peter said to him, "You shall never wash my feet." Jesus answered him, If I don't wash you, you have no share with me." Simon Peter said to him, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Like, I want to shower." And Jesus said, "Hey, Simon Peter." Simon Peter was not of a middle ground. Never. He was or plus or minus. He couldn't be in the middle. But Jesus said, "Hey, no, come here in the middle. Because you don't need forgiveness. You are already forgiven. But you need a daily forgiven. Like, to be daily forgiven. I don't know how to say that. But to wash his feet was just for a little bit of dust. So we need like a portion. Every day, a little bit of portion of, yes, I forgave you. Lord, I did this. Yes, you are clean now. And Jesus wanted to illustrate this and symbolize this by washing their feet. After this, Jesus gave them a new command. Remember the command? John 13, 34, 35. "A new command I give to you, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also are to love one another. By this, all people will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another." Jesus demonstrated them how to be a servant leader and to serve their neighbors. There are too many leaders that they are not ready to love the people they lead. But Simon Peter was taught his lesson, and he became a great leader like Jesus. Simon Peter survived Jesus by about 35 years. His primary ministry was for the Jews, but also he was a leader for the Gentiles. There are historical evidences that he went to Britain and he preached the gospel there. Of his visits in Britain, we have the corroboration of Eusebius Pamphilus, 308 AD, whom Simon, and there is a complicated, and their quotes are saying, sent Peter to have been in Britain as well as in Rome. So this is around year 300. And a most recent commentator, Cornelius a Lapide, he said in his Argumentum Epistolae St. Pauli ad Romanos, in which he answered the question as to why Paul does not salute Peter when he wrote to the Romans. And he said, Peter, banished with the rest of the Jews from Rome by the edict of Claudius, was absent in Britain. And I chose just two of the arguments. I read an entire article about this. And there are tons of evidences that he was in Britain several times, not just one time. And then he was imprisoned in Rome at a place called Tullian. For 9 months he was chained in an upright position, bound to a column, unable to lie down. Even here, however, he converted his jailers and 47 others to Christianity. In 67 AD, he was crucified upside down as his own request because he felt that he is not worthy to be crucified like Jesus Christ. Before he was crucified, he watched his wife dying. Peter had a wife that followed him everywhere in the ministry. Remember, there is is in the scripture. Clement of Alexandria wrote in his book, the Stromata, the following. They say accordingly that the blessed Peter, on seeing his wife led to death, rejoiced on account of her call and convenience home and convenience, Mary called home, and called very encouragingly and comfortably, addressing her by name, remember thou the Lord. So these are the last words toward his wife, remember the Lord, your Lord. Such was the marriage of the blessed and their perfect disposition towards those dearest to them. One of my favorites about, I don't know if you have one of your favorites about Peter, but like number one, my favorite about Peter is when Jesus paid his taxes. I don't know if you remember, is in Matthew 17. Jesus told them that he will die, and they were distressed. They were coming back to Capernaum, and they faced a new difficult situation. Matthew 17, 24 to 27. Matthew 17, 24 to 27. When they came to Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax went up to Peter and said, "Does your teacher not pay the tax?" He said, "Yes." And when he came into the house, Jesus spoke to him first, saying, "What do you think, Simon?" So he was directly involved in this. Okay. So he said, "What do you think, Simon? From who do kings of the earth take toll or tax? From their sons or from others?" Maybe this was the question that Simon was thinking of. It's not fair. I mean, Jesus is the Son of God, and he's paying the tax for the temple. I mean, this is beyond comprehension. However, not to give offense to them, and this is the reason why Jesus paid the tax, to not to give offense to them, go to the sea and cast a hook and take the fish. The man who was used to catch tons of fish, now with the hook and one fish, take the fish, the first fish that comes up, and when you open its mouth, you will find a shekel. Take that and give it to them for me and for yourself. I love it. I love it. I mean, he's the only person on this earth, Jesus paid his taxes. 2 drachmas is half shekel, and this was to pay the temple and for the temple maintenance, okay? And this tax worth 2 days of work day. 2 days of work. So if you work 2 days, you pay the tax. But Jesus paid for him and himself and for Peter. Jesus was not bound to pay the tax, but he paid it so that he would not send a wrong message about earthly authorities, like disregard these authorities. No, he said, "I will pay." So Jesus paid it. But interesting, I was thinking, this kind of fishing was against Simon Peter's principles. But he said, "Lord, if you say so, I will use the hook. I will use the fishing pole. But I don't like it. This is not my style, but I will do it." So he did it, and he caught that fish. Maybe he thought, "Oh, this kind of fishing is for amateurs. I'm a pro." But by now, Peter is more, he's almost there. He's not wholly transformed, but he is almost there. Okay, conclusion. I don't know about you, but I took several lessons from his life. First one, Jesus called you to be his disciple, and me to his disciple, with a purpose in mind, and this purpose relates to the way you are wired. Develop curiosity and ask good questions. People around need good leaders, and also we need good leaders. Be a person of initiative. Don't wait things to happen to you. Be a startup disciple. Ask yourself, am I 100% in? Is this my attitude in the kingdom of God? What do I need to surrender to God so that I might be 100% person? Your works talk so loud about you that I cannot hear what you say. Are you ready to follow Jesus? Is He the one who called you to be a martyr? I don't know. But I think it's our call to encourage others and say, remember your Lord. I don't know if God called you to be a martyr, but I know He called you to encourage others, saying, remember the Lord. Just keep. You will. Just keep going. Just keep going. He's right there. He will be there when you will arrive there. If let's say, I don't know, what happens if you will be called to be a martyr. Have you thought about this? We are in a safe place, Vienna, right? But you never know. You never know. There were other Christians that were killed here in Vienna. Well, 100 years before, ago. But you never know. So think about this. You follow Jesus because He is nice and He's good. And, Sunday I'm used to come to church. Or you follow because you really love Him. Be ready to use all methods. There will come a day when Jesus will blow your mind with His request. Take the fishing pole and go with the hook and do something that is not, is not your thing. And number 7, I think, remember, you are called for a greater purpose. Peter was called for a greater purpose. We are called for a greater purpose, not for our job. We are called for His kingdom. I mean, when I say job, it's this earthly job. So give time for God. Give time for His kingdom. And He will make time for you, for sure.